Hi there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be a wrap-up for the recent March Mystery Madness mid-year version, Subgenre September, which was a one-week readathon, a reading challenge, in which everybody was invited to read at least one mystery, and not even a full mystery. It could just be a short story if that's what you were interested in. So if you follow me on Instagram, you will have seen that I was planning to read Stabbed in the Baklava by Kashian. I didn't read that. The two options for this readathon were to pick a subgenre that you rarely read from or one that you regularly read from. This is a cozy, and I don't read a lot of cozies, so that's why I had picked this, but as I said, I didn't actually get around to reading it. So what I did instead was to go for a subgenre that I regularly read, and actually a couple of subgenres. First, I went for two mystery standbys, and I listened to the audio versions of two short stories by Agatha Christie. The first was a Poirot story called The Second Gong, in which Poirot is invited to dinner for reasons that have not yet been disclosed, but the person who was planning to hire him was murdered. I was going to say mystery ensues, but that should go without saying. As it is a short story in the audio form, I think it was exactly 1 hour, and it is typical of one of these where there are multiple people going to a dinner party. One of them may or may not have committed this murder that's been set up to look like a suicide. The police arrive, Poirot chats to everyone. You know how these stories go. This particular audiobook was narrated by Hugh Fraser, who played Hastings in the series in which David Suchet plays Poirot, so that's always fun because, at least for me, his voice is a Poirot mystery in some ways. So that was fun. Again, short story, I can't say a lot about it, and we all know how these Poirot isolated house type mysteries go, right? The second Agatha Christie story that I listened to is not actually one of her regular detective series, although depending on which edition you pick up, it may say that it is. It doesn't have any of the regular sleuths. And that is The Red Signal. In this story, a group of people gather to, I was going to say see a seance, but to work with a spirit medium, which was popular in the 1920s. And this spirit medium gives a general warning to not go home tonight, but it's not aimed at a particular person, so we deal with the different people and how they interpret whether the spiritualist is ridiculous, whether they believe in seances or not, whether there's a murder in the works. And the red signal of the title is one character's referring to times in his life that he's had an intuitive moment that ended in a death. Once again, this is a short story. This one also was around an hour. I think it was just under an hour. So not a lot I can say, but great fun if you're into this kind of thing. The spiritualist was a bit of a class and possibly ethnic stereotype, so just heads up on that if that's something you're not interested in, but it's of its age. Speaking of an age, one of the next things that I read that is also a mystery is kind of recalling a different age, although it is something that was written this year. And this is Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips' graphic novel, Friend of the Devil, which is part of their Reckless series, which is a kind of 70s pulp type story. Although this particular one is set in the 1980s, it's set amidst a kind of satanic panic kind of story. And I had enjoyed the first one that came out last year. This is similar in that it is slightly too short, I think. Brubaker and Phillips do these kind of neo-noir, neo-pulp stories in a really fantastic way. I have often said that with them, most of the time I think of them as being kind of an automatic 5-star read, because Brubaker's crime stories and Sean Phillips' art are just top-notch most of the time. These, however, don't really land 100% with me. They're still a lot of fun. I still enjoyed reading this, but there's something about bringing it into a 1980s setting that, unlike the 70s or 30s settings that they usually go for, just doesn't work in the same way for me. I enjoyed this, and I think if you're a fan of Brubaker and Phillips and their work, you will enjoy this too. Again, this is, as with a lot of their work, not a book that I would recommend you read in public, just because it does have some pretty graphic violence and sexual imagery, so that's there. It usually is. Yeah, entertaining, but not as brilliant as I tend to expect when I'm reading work from these particular creators. So this sounds negative, but it's not actually negative. It's still great. From any other author and artist, this would be a fantastic book. It's just because my standards for them are too high, maybe. And finally, I read a comic that actually is maybe closer to something that's not usually my thing, so maybe I'm sort of on trend for a subgenre I don't usually read. And I read volume 3 of Something is Killing the Children, which is a supernatural thriller by James Tynion IV and Werther Dell'Edera. I had really enjoyed the first two volumes of this. I read them back to back, and it was really just compelling and compellingly readable in a way that I haven't felt for an ongoing story in, honestly, for a while. So I was really impressed with them. Reading this on its own, I didn't have that same feeling, so it didn't feel as compulsively readable to me. It was fine, but it didn't make me go out and try to catch up with the series as it stands now. However, I don't know that that's really a complaint about the quality, as that I wasn't as caught up in it as I was when I read the first two volumes back to back. Also, I think it's getting more into a kind of secret society intrigue, whereas it was a more straightforward small town beast in the woods killing children, as the title suggests. And I'm just less interested in the intrigue than I was in the thriller/horror elements. So this is still a fun series. I will still pick up the next volume at some point in the future when it comes out, but I didn't find it as compulsively readable as I had with the first two volumes. And again, this is a series that is quite graphically violent. It is monsters killing children, so, you know, if you're reading it in public, be aware there's blood and guts. All right, so that was my subgenre September. I may still read this cozy. We'll see if I can get to it. I will make myself do that, because I don't need to be all depressing all the time, do I? I don't think so. Anyway, if you were taking part in subgenre September, I hope you had a great time. Let me know what you read if you haven't already, because I know I've posted about this on the community tab and on Instagram and everything already. But I'd love to hear if you've read any of these. I'd love to hear what you thought. And yeah, I hope you'll be joining us for the mysteries again in March. And anyway, until then, that's it for now. Ciao.